Hi everyone, and welcome to our panel session on how to approach the virtual recruitment process. I'm Emily, I'm a Target Jobs editor, and I'll be facilitating this discussion. We've got a few questions to start off with, and then if you have any questions of your own, you can type them into the question panel and we'll do our best to answer them. Ideally, it'd be good to keep your questions fairly broad so that we can help as many people as possible. That would be great. I'm going to hand over to our panelists now. So if each of you would like to just say a bit about yourself and what you do, maybe start with Claire, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. My name is Claire Barham. I'm the talent acquisition leader for Cummins. I oversee all of the external recruiting across all of our permanent exempt hiring and all of our early careers hiring across the UK and Europe. I've been with Cummins now for 10 years, but I've been in recruitment a lot longer than that. It's been an interesting year from a recruiting perspective. You know, all of our activities have all gone virtual. I'm excited about the opportunities that we're going to have available, and I'm excited about all the different platforms that we've now got for students to engage with us. So please just ask as many questions as possible. We'll try our best to help.
And Phil?
Absolutely. Hi there. I'm Phil Sartain. I'm the early careers recruitment lead for Aon. So we're a global professional services firm. I've been with Aon about 5 years looking after the early careers team. So all of our apprentices, interns and graduates and industrial placement students come through my team, attend our assessment centres. Much like Claire, all of our activity has moved online, but things have carried on. So I think we're in a fairly fortunate position as a business. So about 80% of our work is non-discretionary work, so work that businesses need to continue to do. So so we have continued to operate throughout the whole of the pandemic and not needed to furlough anyone, and business has carried on, although in a virtual setting. So excited to get this year's recruitment underway.
Great. Joan?
Yeah, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Joan De Fronto and I work in the campus recruitment team at Bloomberg. I've been at the company for 11 years. Around 4 of those, the latest 4 I've spent in recruitment, but I've also worked in different areas of the business. So I've worked in our global data department and also our analytics department. I guess like the other panelists, we've also had a very busy year this year, putting things virtual. We have continued with our recruitment efforts, and we are hiring and started hiring over the last few months for 2021. So quite a few roles available for then, and looking forward to questions from the audience.
Great. So just to start off with, what are the main differences candidates will notice between virtual interviews and assessment centres and face-to-face ones? Maybe go round one at a time again, maybe start with Claire. That's all right.
Yeah, sure, I can help. I think essentially you're going to be using a virtual platform of either Zoom or Skype. For your interview. We've actually created an interview guide to support students on how to log in to either Zoom or Skype, and also lots of tips and tricks on making sure that your Wi-Fi is working properly. Make sure you've got sort of the height correct on your laptop so that you're in the middle of the screen. Make sure that there's no kind of interruptions if possible. I know it's not as easy, but wherever you can, try and be in a quiet space so that you can concentrate. And certainly from the perspective of, so the assessment centres, Zoom has the capability of being able to do some breakout rooms and some breakout exercises as groups. So you may see that the facilitator on the call puts you into a Zoom room so that you can actually do maybe a group exercise with some of the other students that are also in the assessment centre. Yes, whilst it's virtual, you can still interact with others, on the call. You can chat with people, you can talk to other people on the call through the chat function, both publicly and privately. So please don't be nervous about the technology. It will work and it will help you. All of our students who've started with us this time did a 3-day virtual onboarding, and they were broken out into different Zoom rooms to do group exercises. And they all had a fabulous experience. They've all turned around and said it worked so well, and it made them feel really comfortable. So don't be frightened of the technology, is what I would say.
Thanks. And maybe Phil next.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you'll see hopefully quite a few similarities between the assessment centres that we would have run in person versus the virtual assessment centres over the next season. So the activities for us broadly remain the same. So our students will still go through a written activity. They'll be able to perhaps do that in advance, and they'll be able to log into our online assessment centre platform in advance, and there'll be other information available in advance. There'll be a little bit of extra that they can do ahead of the day if you want to. There will still be a one-on-one interview, and that'll be via WebEx. So again, kind of similar things to Claire there. And then in terms of the other activities, we use our online assessment centre platform for our group activities to be broken into slightly smaller groups than perhaps we would have done in person. So in person, we would have tended to have groups of 6. We usually do groups of 4 for our online assessment centres, just to give people a little bit more of an opportunity to speak, because we know that's slightly harder in a virtual environment, because you're not able to look quite as easily at people's body language for the cues or it's a little bit harder not to interrupt people. So we break people into slightly smaller groups. So that's one of the changes. And they'll still be on our online presentations. So in the same way we would have done those in person. We're also still ensuring that people get the opportunity to not only engage with their interviewers, but graduates from the firm during the day as well. So there'll be some more informal Q&A sessions that we will schedule those. Previously perhaps would have happened over lunch. We now will have a more formally scheduled time for those conversations to happen. So you'll still be able to kind of find out more about the programs and ask more questions to those going through that experience. So we've still ensured that we've got that opportunity as well. So, but yeah, it'll feel very similar as much as we reasonably can to the normal in-person assessment centres.
Joan?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So like many employers, we have gone fully virtual in our recruitment process for 2020 as well. I think having said that, like Phil, the actual process hasn't actually changed that much. So, the application process and the different stages remain quite similar. The difference is it is over a video conference rather than coming into the office. I think one of the main differences that candidates will see, obviously, if you come into the office, you do really get to experience the work environment and what the culture is like while you're in the office. But we have tried to replicate that as best as we can within our assessment days. So there's some elements that we've tweaked just to give people a bit of a better understanding of what the role is like and what the company is like. And then, like other panelists, we have also added more online content, for example, to our website. We run a whole suite of different virtual events as well, like Discover Bloomberg events, where candidates can join and just get a better insight into things. So I do think we have those additional things just to kind of help with that kind of environment piece, which I think can be missed if you're not in the office.
That's really interesting. Thank you, everyone. Next question was, what are some of the best ways to prepare for these differences? Maybe mix it up a bit and start with Joan this time, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So I think actually Claire had made a really good point about testing out the technology. I think that's really key. Make sure you are familiar with whatever video conferencing software you're using, whether it's Zoom or something else. because there are a whole suite of them out there, and I think we're seeing just more and more of them as well pop up. So do try to test it out beforehand. At Bloomberg, we do, before our assessment days, have a call with the candidates prior to the assessment day, just so they can check those things out, so they can check the video, the audio. So I think that's really important. And then, like for any interview that you're doing, doing your normal preparation around reading up on the company and its products. But I would also say it's increasingly important to also look at the content that the company has. For example, they may have additional videos. We have a Bloomberg YouTube channel where you can look at videos, what it's like to work in the office, or employee testimonials. And I think these are all really key, especially if you don't have the opportunity to come into the office.
Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo very much what Joan and Claire have said on this. I think probably the one, I suppose, perhaps additional thing I'd say is think about kind of what some of your kind of backup plans might be. So if you are struggling with your Wi-Fi or your camera works, can you use a different device? So perhaps if you've logged in via a tablet, could you use a smartphone, or dial into the session perhaps over the phone, rather than using the internet if your internet drops out, and having those things ready so they're ready to go, so you gives you then the confidence to go and going, I can join this no matter what. And companies will be really understanding for those technical issues. They're absolutely happening for their colleagues all day, every day. The systems work well, but then absolutely they're not perfect, and things happen, and I think people are very understanding about that. But the more prepared you can be, that'll just give you the confidence to be able to calmly then try something else if that hasn't worked, rather than panicking and that flustering you and potentially impacting your performance. So that's probably the one final thing I'd add to the great tips. And much like Joan, we do preparation calls as well, and I think our students have found that really useful when going through the online processes.
Claire?
Yeah, I'm trying to find some extra pointers there, because Phil and Joan have actually given some really good ones, but I am going to refer to the guide that we've created. I hope you don't mind. But I think an interesting one is, choose your what you're wearing, sort of carefully. Busy prints don't go well with the camera. So, so to have a think about sort of, what you're wearing. Make sure that you're looking at the camera, because we like to still have eye contact, so that we can still feel like we're engaging with you, face to face. And I would also say, don't worry if somebody comes into the room, that you're in. Don't worry, just say, interrupt and just say, I apologize, I've just got somebody in the room. Maybe take yourself off video, go on mute, sort it out really quickly, and then come back into the call. But, just take a deep breath before you come back into the call, and then put your video back on again. Also, having video backgrounds, I've got a Zoom background here, actually disguises what's in my room. I'm currently sat upstairs in our 3rd bedroom, but I really don't want people seeing my wallpaper. So I've chosen like an appropriate sort of background. In our meetings, Phil, Joan, you'll all see that everybody's got all sorts of different kind of Zoom backgrounds going on, from the Millennium Falcon to somewhere on a beach resort. But, maybe choose a background carefully. Or if you haven't got a background, then choose maybe a plain background without loads of posters and things like that on the wall. So it's just being mindful of what's going to be seen on the camera.
Those were really good tips, thank you. The next question was, this kind of follows on from what Claire said, actually. What are your tips for creating the best conditions for a video interview if your living situation isn't really ideal for it? Maybe start with Joan.
Yeah, sure. So, I think firstly, it's really important in the interview that you can do your best. And in order to do that, you have to feel as confident and comfortable as possible. I think in the situation that we're in, it's obviously quite a unique and challenging situation. And do remember that, companies are very aware of that, and they should be very understanding as well of the situations and different things that can arise. I would say, you know, if there are going to be distractions and you're going to feel nervous about that during the interview, then yeah, absolutely say something, you know, if you prefer to at the start to your interviewers or during the interview, if that comes up. You know, yeah, be clear on that to them, and don't, you know, don't feel bad or nervous about saying that. Personally, I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I completely understand what it's like to have interruptions, and that's just a normal part of life nowadays. You know, and what I would say is also bear in mind that your interviewers are likely to have had some kind of situation too. So maybe that makes you feel a bit better if you look at it from that perspective.
Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. I very much echo what we've heard from Joan and what we've already heard. I think in terms of the tips, I think we expect there might be a few issues, so absolutely bring that up. But also people do their best to, or we encourage candidates to do their best to kind of control the controllables. So if there are things that you can do to help prepare yourself or prepare your environment, or arranging kind of any support you might need from your kind of family to perhaps. In my case, I've got a puppy, and she can be quite vocal at times. It's probably the nicest way of putting it. So I'll let my husband know if I've got a call or something that is important that I really would rather not be interrupted. He'll try and make time to look after our puppy, or we'll find an alternative. And that's where you can reasonably do it. Things still come up, and that's okay, and I think companies will be very understanding, but do what you can to control your environment and plan for that in advance, and that will help give you the confidence that you can then essentially focus on the activity. But absolutely, if there are interruptions or you're expecting something, let people know, and I'm sure they'll be quite understanding. But do what you can to avoid it, and prepare to give yourself the confidence you need to perform at your best.
And Claire?
Yeah, there's not much more I can add to that. Do you know, there's one thing though that always sticks in my mind, and I've just double checked it before I came on this call, was to make sure the power cord was plugged in for my laptop, because and Phil's laughing, it will literally just shut your computer down. So, you know, it's preparing for these things. Make sure the power cord is plugged in, because you don't want it to switch off halfway through, because then you will be flustered joining back into the interview. But honestly, from our side on the interview panel, that's happened to us so many times. Please be reassured that, you know, we also have challenges on our side of the camera as well. My daughter has Zoom bombed my video calls so many times over the summer, but it's fine. And it is okay. It is life at the moment, you know, and we're all making allowances for it. And please just don't be worried about it. But plug your laptop in.
Brilliant. The next one was, some people might use this as a chance to have notes to refer to because the recruiter won't be able to see their surroundings. Do you have any thoughts on this, such as where should they put notes, or how should they approach referring to them during the interview? Maybe start with Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely kind of the virtual environment does offer you that opportunity. I would say kind of use it carefully would tend to be my advice. So don't use it as an excuse not to prepare. I would still prepare for a virtual interview in exactly the same way you would expect to prepare for a face-to-face, still putting in the same amount of preparation, research that you would have done if you were coming in face-to-face, because that's going to give you the most confidence to be able to respond articulately to the questions that you're asked during the course of that interview. I sometimes do have a few notes and bullet points around my screen, but don't read from them. I'd say that's really clear when someone's not making eye contact with you, when it's not spontaneous. You can tell when someone's reading a pre-prepared answer, and that doesn't come across, as well as just being authentic and just speaking from what you know and prepared. So still make sure you prepare. Absolutely, if it helps you to have a couple couple of notes around, but don't go over the top, still prepare in the same way you would have done where perhaps you wouldn't have had the same opportunity. Equally, I'd still encourage people to do what I would do in an interview, is still have a notepad to be able to, when someone's asking a question, particularly if it's a long one, note down a couple of those key things from the question so you can make sure that you've fully answered that. And I would encourage someone to do that in a face-to-face in the same way as they might do with a virtual interview.
Claire?
I guess I really mirror what Phil's saying. You know, it is okay at the beginning of an interview to say, I hope you don't mind, I've taken some notes, or I've prepared some notes in advance. But it's always important that you try your best to limit how much you're looking at your notes, because you lose the eye contact. But it is okay to say that you've prepared some notes, because we want to know that you've prepared before the interview. But actually, I quite like the idea of what Phil said. You know, if you've got Post-it notes up on the wall around the back of your laptop, we'll only see you looking up. So I would recommend what that suggestion that Phil's made, to be fair.
Joan?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's obviously really key for candidates to prepare prior to their interview. And I think understandably with that, a lot of people will make notes. What I would echo is that be really careful about referring to those notes during the interview. So, you know, in the interview, we are obviously looking that you have the right skill set and you're going to be a good match for the role in the company. But we also want it to be a very good two-way conversation. And if you're referring to notes, it's actually quite difficult for that to come across the right way. And I think you can also run the risk, if you're referring to notes, of coming across as too rehearsed, or actually just reading off, you know, a page or a note that you have stuck on your computer. So do also be careful, you know, be careful about doing that. So I would encourage people more so to do the preparation in advance, but come into the interview as it being like a good two-way conversation that you want to have. And I think as well, when you're doing that, it comes across as more genuine. Whereas if you're reading off notes, again, you run that risk of it not being as natural or as genuine as it could be.
The last question was, what are your predictions for the future? So do you expect virtual recruitment processes to be the norm for quite a long time yet? Phil, start off?
Absolutely. So I think certainly for the course of the pandemic, I think that these are going to continue to be the norm until we've moved out of it, until we're safe to move back into offices kind of fully and be able to have visitors in fully and be back to normal. Then I think virtual will continue to play a big part. And I think there's definitely some learnings I think we will all take out of the virtual environment. And our CEOs often talked about the new better in this space. And that's not necessarily saying this is a great situation to be in, but it's saying that there are learnings and there are things that we can take to create kind of that new better in the future. So I think certainly from this type of activity, in interaction, engagement, this is a great way of kind of democratizing things and allowing more people to join sessions who perhaps couldn't have joined in the past, where we were tied to going to one university or another, or people traveling to a physical location. So I think that's been great. I think for the early stage of the process, those have been virtual in the past and will remain virtual. I think for us, our final stage assessment centres, absolutely, there might be some elements that we move online, but there will always continue to be, for us in the future, once we're through the pandemic, that face-to-face element of bringing people into offices, allowing them to meet their assessors. I think that will still take place once we're ready again in the future, because it's great to be able to for candidates to be able to see the space that they might be working into and to meet people face-to-face, and for our colleagues as well.
Joan, next, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I think I would echo actually a lot of what Phil has said. We've definitely learned a lot over the past few months. It's been a huge learning process, and we've had to very quickly adapt and make changes to our process. I think, you know, we've seen both pros and cons of having everything virtual. Obviously, people don't necessarily have that same exposure to the office environment as you would in-house, but we've also seen like huge benefits, such as us being able to reach a much larger and more diverse pool of candidates by doing things virtually, which is fantastic. And I think you also see some sustainability benefits as well, because we don't have lots of candidates traveling into the office, in particular at early stages. You know, so there's lots of positives. And I think going forward, you know, it's difficult to say at this point if everything's going to go virtual. I would predict it's probably going to be more of a kind of blended format of doing certain elements of the process virtual, and then, you know, continuing to have some things in-house as well. But yeah, again, it's been a huge learning process, and you know, some good experiences and things have come out of it too.
Great. And we've got loads of really good questions come in. I was thinking to allow enough time to answer plenty of them, rather than going around all three of you, if maybe just one of you wants to jump in each time. So to start with, when looking for graduate roles in 2021, should applicants for your company expect to be working from home or remotely? Do any of you want to take it?
If I jump in on that one, certainly we are planning to be certainly working from home until into January so far, and it keeps getting assessed on a month-by-month basis. You know, we originally thought we might be back in the office by October, but then they've extended that out to January. They'll assess it, the businesses will assess it month on month. I think in terms of by September of next year, we really don't know. But companies are well set up now. It feels like we've been working virtually for a long time. But I think, you know, we are well set up to help new starters join our businesses virtually. You know, there's lots of activities to do, team building, all done by Zoom, you know, and there is chance for you to have sort of, you know, like social calls in the middle of the day, you know, in order to have, you know, that networking opportunity that's not just all about work. So I think potentially by September of next year, we could still be working remotely. We just don't know at the moment, but certainly from Cummins' perspective, we are definitely at home till January, and then they'll assess it again.
Did any of the others have anything to add to that?
No, I think pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I think once it's safe to do so, people will return to offices. But I think colleague safety is first and foremost, and that includes any new colleagues coming into the business.
Any advice for completing group exercises at virtual assessment centres? So how to make sure you're getting your point across in a virtual setting?
I mean, I can take that. So we do run group exercises as part of some of our assessment days for roles here. One of the things I think is really important is that for our assessment days, at least in that group exercise, we are looking at how people collaborate with one another. That is one of the things we're assessing, and it's a very important way of how we're working. And that can actually be very helpful as well to the candidates. So I think if you go in with that frame of mind that actually, you know, this is one of the things I want to show that I can do well, and I want to work well with this group of people, and we're all working as a team, that can really kind of facilitate how you will do your group discussion. So that would be, yeah, that would be my kind of one key tip. Just collaborate as much as you can with everybody.
I think I'd like to add to that as well, is just really observe the other people on the call as well. And, you know, a really nice touch actually is if you see that there is somebody who hasn't contributed, invite them to give their opinion, and give them the confidence to be able to step into the conversation. So if you see that somebody really has sat back and been quite quiet, then just say, what do you think? and actually direct the question directly to them, to give them the opportunity to be able to join in, because that's considered, you know, really strong collaboration skills, team building skills. So maybe think about it from that perspective.
For a video interview, how important is the quality of the microphone and camera?
I think the microphone is more important than the camera, because if you have some technical issues, you know, sometimes it can help to actually go off camera. It can actually make the microphone and the sound a lot clearer, and it can stop it from breaking up. So we've actually found going off camera can help. I don't know whether any of the others have found that.
I think what I would say here as well is you know, in the panel discussion, we just reiterated that fact. Make sure you kind of test out where possible, you know, any of the different video conference tools that you're using. And if there are issues, because of course that can happen, maybe the internet is not working very well or whatever, for whatever reason that day, do make the recruitment team or coordination team at the company aware that you've been having those issues as well. I think it's important to give us a heads up, you know, and then we can take that into account when we are reviewing it.
There's two fairly sort of related questions here. How are employers assessing our qualities when we're in a virtual room? And what sort of skills do you look for a candidate to show in group settings? So qualities and skills we're looking for.
So I think we've touched on this a little bit. Certainly that collaboration is something kind of really key, and that doesn't need to change in a virtual environment. And I think this is one of the things in terms of the way we assess the competencies that we would be looking at, the strengths we'd be looking at during those assessment centres for a group activity. Those don't change in a virtual environment. So I think it's important to remember that collaboration, the ideas that you're bringing to that group activity, your communication skills, those are still some of the key things that we're going to continue to be looking at and assessing broadly in the same way. And I think a lot of firms have tried to take that model of what they've done in face-to-face environment, and as much as reasonably possible translate that into a virtual environment without too many changes. Obviously we've made changes to the size of the group for the group activity to make it more effective, but so they've made small changes like that, but fundamentally most of us aim for the experience to be quite similar, because if we do switch back to a face-to-face environment at some point, we want to be able to compare candidates in the same way, and perhaps not this year but in future years.
I think as well, the listening skills are certainly something that we will be assessing for, you know, listening to the instructions, listening to the other colleagues on the call, you know, responding by listening first rather than jumping in, you know, with something that's completely not relevant to the discussion. So really carefully listen on the calls before then, you know, sort of contributing. I would say that really does help. You know, and again, Phil, I agree, it's the collaboration, it's making sure that everybody is joining in on the call, getting the team to contribute, not just one or two key people doing all the talking. You make sure that others have got the opportunity who are quieter, because it will be really hard. There will be individuals who are quieter and they're not quite as extrovert, and they'll find it really difficult to join in unless somebody says, "What do you think?" But, you know, by asking questions, you're generating a conversation on the call, and that leads to collaboration.
This is a really good one. Face-to-face interviews often help break the ice and an opportunity for candidates to loosen up a bit. What advice would you give to help candidates loosen up and feel more comfortable during video interviews?
Yeah, I can take that. So again, I think I would go back to some of what the other panelists have said before, and with Bloomberg too, that the process going virtual hasn't actually changed that much compared to in-house. So we are, we're still looking at the same kind of skills and so on. In terms of that, I guess that face-to-face contact and icebreaker, again, bear in mind that the interviewers, they're going to be very kind of familiar with doing these types of interviews over a virtual format. They again understand that it's quite a unique situation that we're in, and if there are potentially any kind of issues on your side, or you're feeling a bit nervous, they do understand that, and they will be trying to put you at ease too. So again, I would say, like any interview, just make sure you're prepared going in. Try to go in as confidently, comfortably as you can. It's still possible to build that rapport with your interviewers over that virtual setting, like we've seen in all the interviews that we've done, but we also see in the new way that we're working, where we have to find kind of different ways to communicate and collaborate. So I think, just try to be as much at ease as possible, and try to build that rapport, even though it is over the virtual format.
I think we've got time for one more. Is it better to look at the interviewer's face on the screen, or looking into the camera lens?
Well, that's a good question. I would say look at them on the screen. It'll feel more natural, because I'm looking at the camera now and I can't see what's going on my face or anyone else's faces. So I would say look at the screen.
I think that question has definitely made me more conscious of whether I'm looking at the screen or looking at the camera. So good question. But I think, I would agree with Claire there. It's probably important that you're looking at the interviewers, right? Because if you want to create that more natural two-way conversation, looking at the camera may actually be a bit distracting. So when it comes to things like you doing a presentation, for example, that can be different. It might be useful to then kind of glance at the camera now and then. But if you're actually having that conversation with interviewers, then you want to also be making the eye contact, looking at them. That's going to help you feel like you have that link a bit better.
Yeah. Probably the only thing I would add is if you've got a camera that's in a significantly different place to your screen. So if I look at my second screen, you'll see me looking away all the time. Just let the interviewer know if you're in that kind of slightly different setup where it's easier for you to be looking away. Just let them know, because then they'll kind of realize and be able to adapt if they're not kind of in line.
Great. Well, I think we're starting to run out of time, but I hope that's been helpful for everyone. And for those who had slightly more broad questions about sort of how to stand out in video interviews and assessment centres, we do have advice on Target Jobs about that, so take a look. Thank you very much to all our panellists. It's been really, really helpful. Lots of good tips there. And yeah, I think that's it really. Stay safe everyone, wherever you're social distancing, and good luck with your job hunting.